The news reached Earth within hours. Every screen on 6 colonized worlds showed the same footage. A single human in a gray uniform, stepping forward in a chamber full of aliens, volunteering to fight for his entire species. Some people called Jack Morrison a hero. Others called him a fool. Most just watched in silence, trying to understand what would happen next. Jack was brought to Haven Station, a massive orbital platform that circled Earth like a metal moon. The station was home to humanity's greatest scientists, strategists, and soldiers. For the next 40 days, it would become Jack's entire world. Dr. Kevin Park was the first to meet him when he arrived. Kevin was a xenobiologist who had spent 30 years studying alien species. He was short, balding, and had the tired eyes of a man who had seen too much. "Commander Morrison," Kevin said, shaking Jack's hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Just Jack is fine," Jack replied, "and I have a feeling circumstances are only going to get worse." Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are not wrong. Come with me. We have a lot of work to do." The briefing room was filled with screens showing data about the 7 trials of Beatel. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Tran stood at the main display, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a tactical specialist who had fought in 3 border conflicts. Her face was hard, and she did not smile when Jack entered. "Let me be clear," Lisa said, before anyone else could speak. "I think this is suicide. But since you have already volunteered, my job is to give you the best chance of survival." "I appreciate the honesty," Jack said. Lisa tapped the display, and images began to appear. Beatel consists of 7 trials across 7 worlds. Each trial tests a different quality: endurance, intelligence, sacrifice, isolation, combat, and 2 others that we do not have clear records of. "Why not?" Jack asked. "Because no one has survived long enough to report back." Kevin stepped forward. "The trials are designed to be almost impossible. The ancient species who created Beatel wanted to push champions to their absolute limits. Most species send their strongest warriors or their smartest scientists. It rarely matters. The trials find weaknesses that no one expects." Jack studied the images on the screen. He saw alien worlds covered in acid storms, frozen wastelands, and structures that seemed to defy physics. He saw records of past champions, warriors from species far older and stronger than humanity. Most of them had died in the first 3 trials. "What about the Vreliki?" Jack asked. "What do we know about their champion?" Lisa changed the display. A massive insectoid creature appeared on screen. "His name is Sketh. He is their greatest warrior. He has competed in Beatel twice before, and won both times. He has killed 19 opponents in personal combat." Jack looked at the image for a long moment. Sketh was nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through metal. His body was covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. He was, by any measure, far more dangerous than any human. "He is impressive," Jack said quietly. "He is a killing machine," Lisa replied. "And the Vreliki chosen specifically because they know humans cannot match him physically." The door to the briefing room opened, and a woman walked in. She had the same brown hair and green eyes as Jack. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. "Grace," Jack said, surprised. "What are you doing here? You are supposed to be on Titan." Dr. Grace Morrison was Jack's younger sister. She was an archaeologist who specialized in dead civilizations. Her work kept her far from Earth, digging through ruins on moons and asteroids, trying to understand species that had vanished millions of years ago. "I came as fast as I could," Grace said. "Jack, I found something important." She walked to the display and inserted a small data chip. New images appeared on screen. They showed ancient symbols carved into stone. texts written in languages that had not been spoken for eons. 3 months ago, my team found an archive on a dead world in the outer systems, Grace explained. The species that built it died out long before the Vreliki or the Kethrani evolved. But they knew about Beatel, they wrote about it. Kevin leaned forward. What did they say? Grace's voice dropped. Beatel was not created to find the strongest species. It was not designed to identify the most intelligent. The ancients built it to find something else entirely. What? Jack asked. Grace looked at her brother. They called it the fire that refuses to die. The trials are designed to push champions past their limits, past the point where any logical being would give up. The ancients wanted to find species that would keep going anyway. Species that would refuse to surrender, even when surrender was the only rational choice. The room fell silent. Lisa looked skeptical. Kevin looked thoughtful. Jack looked at the ancient symbols on the screen and felt something stir in his chest. Humanity has been through ice ages, Grace continued. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have burned our own cities to the ground in wars and then rebuilt them. We have pushed ourselves to the edge of extinction and pulled back. Every time we fell, we got up again. That is what the ancients were looking for. Not strength, not intelligence, refusal to quit. Jack smiled. It was the same smile he had worn in the council chamber. So the trials are not designed to be won by the strongest. No, Grace said. They are designed to be won by the most persistent. By the species that will keep fighting after all hope is gone. Lisa shook her head. That is a nice theory, but Sketh has won twice. He is not human. He does not have this fire you are talking about. Sketh won because his opponents gave up, Grace replied. The Vreliki are strong, but they are also practical. When the odds turn against them, they retreat and regroup. They do not understand the concept of fighting to the last breath. Jack stood and walked to the window. Haven Station hung above Earth, and he could see the blue and green planet below. 3 billion people lived on that world. Billions more lived in the colonies. All of them were counting on him. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, Jack said quietly. My father used to tell me stories about our ancestors. Farmers who kept planting crops even after locusts destroyed everything. Soldiers who kept fighting even when they were surrounded. Explorers who kept walking even when they had no idea where they were going. He turned back to face the others. The Vreliki think they know what humans are. They see us as weak, short-lived, fragile. They do not understand that those things made us stronger, not weaker. We know we do not have much time, so we do not waste it. We know we can be hurt, so we learn to endure pain. We know we can die, so we learn that some things are worth dying for. Kevin nodded slowly. The trials will nearly kill you. I know. You will face things that no human has ever faced. I know. And you still think you can win? Jack Morrison looked at the team assembled around him. Scientists, soldiers, and his own sister. They had come together to prepare him for the impossible. He owed them an honest answer. I do not know if I can win, he said, but I know that I will not stop trying. That is all I can promise. The transport ship Endeavor was prepared over the next weeks. Jack trained every day, pushing his body and mind to their limits. He learned everything the scientists could tell him about the trial worlds. He practiced combat techniques that might keep him alive against Sketh. On the last night before departure, Grace came to see him. Are you afraid? She asked. Jack looked at the stars through the station window. Yes, but fear is just a feeling. It does not control me. Come back alive, she said. I will try, Jack replied. The next morning, the Endeavor carried Jack Morrison toward the first trial world. Behind him, 300 billion humans waited and hoped. The first trial world was called Kethros Prime. It was a planet of crushing gravity and endless storms. The sky was yellow with toxic clouds, and acid rain fell constantly. Nothing lived there except microscopic creatures that had adapted to the poison over millions of years. Jack Morrison stood at the starting line with 6 other champions. Each one represented a species that had been challenged in this cycle of Beatel. They came from worlds scattered across the galaxy, and none of them expected to survive. Skef stood at the far end of the line. His black armor gleamed even under the yellow sky. He did not look at Jack. He did not need to. In his mind, the human was already dead. A drone floated above them, broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched as the High Arbiter's voice announced the first trial. The Trial of Endurance. Champions will cross the Valley of Storms. The first to reach the far side wins. Those who fall will be removed from competition. The valley stretched before them, a landscape of jagged rocks and pools of acid. Lightning struck the ground every few seconds. The air itself burned. A tone sounded, and the champions began to run. Skef moved like a machine. His 4 legs carried him across the rocks with terrible speed. His natural armor protected him from the acid and the lightning. Within minutes, he had pulled far ahead of the others. Jack did not try to match his speed. He knew he could not. Instead, he focused on survival. His suit protected him from the worst of the acid, but it was already beginning to corrode. Every breath burned his lungs, despite the filters. Every step required concentration to avoid the pools of poison. 2 champions fell in the first hour. One slipped into an acid pool and dissolved before the rescue drones could reach him. Another was struck by lightning and did not get up. Jack kept walking. The storm grew worse as he moved deeper into the valley. Winds tore at his suit. Acid ate through the outer layers. He could feel the burning on his skin now, small spots where the protection had failed. Another champion collapsed ahead of him, a crystalline being from a world of ice, its body cracked by the heat and pressure. Jack stopped beside it. "Go," the being whispered through its translator. "There is nothing you can do." Jack hesitated. Every second he spent here was a second he fell further behind, but he could not leave. He pulled the being into the shelter of a large rock, away from the direct path of the storm. "Rescue drones will find you here," Jack said. "Hold on." The being made a sound that might have been laughter. "You waste your time on a competitor. Strange creature." Jack did not answer. He just started walking again. Then, 4. Jack's suit was barely holding together. He had stopped feeling the burns on his skin because there were too many of them. His lungs ached with every breath. His muscles screamed for rest. But he kept walking. When he finally emerged from the valley, he found Skef waiting at the finish line. The Vreliki champion had arrived hours ago. He stood perfectly still, watching as Jack stumbled out of the storm. The observers could not believe it. The human should have died a dozen times over. His suit was destroyed. His body was covered in acid burns, but he was still standing. "You are persistent," Skef said. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. Jack looked up at the massive warrior. "I told you I would finish. You did not tell me anything." "No, but now you know." The second trial took place on the frozen moon of Veltar. Here, the champions faced the trial of wit. They were brought before an ancient artificial intelligence, a machine built by beings who had ascended beyond physical form long ago. The machine posed paradoxes, questions with no answers, puzzles designed to break minds that tried to solve them. 2 more champions went mad trying to find solutions. They were removed, screaming things that their translators could not process. One champion, a being of pure energy, simply surrendered. It could not accept that some questions had no answers. Jack sat in silence for 11 hours. He did not try to solve the paradoxes the way the machine expected. He did not search for logical answers to illogical questions. Instead, he thought about what the questions meant. Why would ancient beings create puzzles with no solutions? What were they really testing? When he finally spoke, his answer surprised everyone. "The paradox is not meant to be solved," Jack said. "You are not asking me to find an answer. You are asking me to accept that some things cannot be answered, and to keep thinking anyway." The machine was silent for a long moment. In 800 cycles, no champion had responded this way. They had all tried to force solutions, to prove their intelligence through raw mental power. This human had shown something different. Humility, curiosity, the willingness to admit ignorance while still seeking knowledge. "Interesting," the machine said. "You may proceed." The third trial was the hardest so far. It took place on a station orbiting a dying star. The trial of sacrifice. Champions were placed in a simulation. They were given control of a ship with limited resources. In one direction lay safety. In the other direction lay a planet full of simulated beings who would die without help. The twist was simple. There were not enough resources to save both the champion and the planet. Someone would die. Every previous champion had chosen survival. The architects of Beatel expected this. They measured how long each champion hesitated before making the logical choice. Jack did not hesitate. He turned the ship toward the planet immediately, knowing it would cost him everything in the simulation. When the scenario ended, he stood before the judges with a calm face. "You chose to save strangers," the lead judge said. "Beings you had never met, beings whose species you did not even recognize." "Yes." "Why?" Jack thought about his answer for a long moment. "On my world, we have people who run into burning buildings to save strangers. We have soldiers who jump on explosives to protect people they have never met. We have doctors who work until they collapse, trying to save patients who cannot pay them." He paused. "We do not do these things because we are heroes. We do them because we believe that some things matter more than survival. If I let a billion beings die to save myself, I would not be worth saving." The judges conferred in languages that the translators struggled to process. Finally, they announced their decision. Jack had passed. In the observation areas across the galaxy, the Vreliki representatives exchanged worried looks. This was not proceeding as they had expected. The human should have been eliminated in the first trial. He should have gone mad in the second. He should have chosen survival in the third. Instead, he kept passing, not through strength or intelligence, but through something they did not fully understand. Kraveth, the Vreliki ambassador, summoned Sketh for a private meeting. "The human is still alive," Kraveth said. "This concerns me." Sketh's mandibles clicked. "He is injured, weak. He will not survive the remaining trials. You underestimate him. I have never lost." Kraveth studied his champion. "The humans are different from other species. They do not think the way we do. They do not calculate cost and benefit the same way. Be careful." Sketh made a sound of dismissal. "He is flesh and bone. He breaks like any other creature. When we meet in combat, I will show you how fragile he truly is." But even as he spoke, Sketh remembered the look in Jack's eyes when he had emerged from the Valley of Storms. Burned, broken, barely able to stand, and still smiling. Perhaps the ambassador was right to worry. 4 trials remained. The human was still standing. And across the galaxy, billions of humans watched their champion and began to hope. The 4th trial took place on a world called the Silence. It was a planet of complete darkness, where no star ever shone and no sound ever echoed. The champions were placed in chambers of total sensory deprivation. No light, no sound, no touch, nothing. Most species required constant stimulation to maintain their sanity. Their minds needed input from the outside world to function properly. Without it, they began to fall apart. The Vreliki lasted 12 days. Their champion before Sketh had set that record, and it had never been broken. A silicon-based being from the outer reaches managed 19 days before its mind cracked. Jack Morrison spent 31 days in the darkness. Inside the void, time had no meaning. Jack could not see his own hands. He could not hear his own heartbeat. He could not feel the walls around him. There was only endless nothing. Most beings would have gone mad within hours. Their minds would have created hallucinations to fill the emptiness. They would have screamed until their voices gave out, desperate for any sensation. Jack did something different. He told himself stories. In the darkness, he remembered every book he had ever read. He recited every poem his mother had taught him as a child. He replayed every memory, from his first day on the farm in Nebraska to the moment he had stepped forward in the council chamber. He held conversations with people who existed only in his mind. He argued with his father about politics. He discussed philosophy with Grace. He planned imaginary missions with his old squad. He carried his species' entire history within him. Stories of humans who had survived worse. Prisoners who had spent years in solitary confinement. Sailors lost at sea for months. Explorers trapped in caves with no light. They had all found ways to survive. They had filled the emptiness with the contents of their own minds. And that was what the ancients had been testing. Not the ability to endure physical pain, but the ability to carry enough inside yourself to survive when everything external was taken away. When Jack emerged from the chamber on day 31, the observers could not believe what they were seeing. He was thin and weak, but his eyes were clear. His mind was intact. "How?" the lead judge asked. "How did you survive?" Jack blinked in the sudden light. "I was never alone. I had everyone I have ever known keeping me company." The fifth trial followed soon after. The trial of fury, combat. Jack had known this was coming. He had trained for months, learning every technique that might give him a chance against Sketh. But standing in the arena, facing the massive Vireliki warrior, he understood that training might not be enough. Sketh was nearly 8 feet tall. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel. His body was covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. He had killed 19 opponents in personal combat. Jack was 6 feet tall. He had 2 arms and no armor. He was still recovering from the previous trials. His body was covered in scars and half-healed burns. The arena was a perfect circle, made of some material that absorbed all impact. There would be no running, no hiding, just 2 beings fighting until one could not continue. A tone sounded, and Sketh attacked. The Vireliki warrior moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. His claws cut through the air where Jack had been standing a moment before. Jack rolled to the side, barely avoiding death. The fight continued for minutes that felt like hours. Jack could not match Sketh's strength or speed. Every time he tried to attack, the warrior's armor deflected his blows. Every time he tried to retreat, claws nearly took his head off. But Jack noticed something. Sketh fought like a machine, using perfect technique and overwhelming force. He expected his opponents to fight the same way. When they could not match him, they gave up. Jack did not fight like a machine. He fought like a human. He used tricks and feints. He exploited tiny openings that Sketh did not expect. He took hits that would have killed most beings, and kept fighting anyway. 9 minutes into the fight, Sketh landed a blow that broke Jack's right arm in 3 places. The pain was beyond anything Jack had ever experienced. He heard the bones crack. He felt them shift under his skin. Sketh paused, expecting surrender. In his experience, wounded opponents always surrendered. It was the logical choice. Jack did not surrender. He switched his fighting stance, protecting his broken arm and continuing to move. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. His vision was going dark at the edges, but he kept fighting. Another minute passed. Sketh grew frustrated. This human would not stop. Every time he thought the fight was over, the creature found some way to continue. It was not logical. It was not rational. It was terrifying. Finally, Skath saw his opening. He caught Jack with a sweeping blow that cracked 2 ribs and sent him flying across the arena. Jack hit the ground hard and did not get up immediately. Skath walked toward him slowly. The rules of Beatel allowed killing blows in combat trials. He had used them 19 times before. He raised his claws for the final strike, and then he stopped. Jack had grabbed a shard of broken equipment from his own damaged suit. He held it against Skath's lower thorax, pressed against the nerve cluster that Jack had spent weeks studying. One push, and both of them would die. "If I go," Jack whispered through blood-filled lungs, "you go with me." Skath froze. His claws hung in the air, inches from Jack's throat. Neither of them could move without destroying the other. The judges conferred for several minutes. Finally, they made their announcement. A draw. The first draw in Beatel history. Medical drones rushed into the arena as Skath stepped back. Jack's vision was fading. He could barely hear the announcements being made. But he was still conscious when they carried him away. And he was still smiling. In the medical bay, the doctors worked for hours to repair the damage. Broken bones, internal bleeding, wounds that would have killed any normal person. But Jack Morrison was not a normal person. He had spent his entire life preparing for moments like this without knowing it. Skath came to see him while he was recovering. The massive warrior stood in the doorway of the medical room, his black armor reflecting the soft lights. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You should have surrendered," Skath finally said. Jack looked at him with eyes that were tired but undefeated. "That is not how we do things. You would have died. Maybe, but I would have taken you with me." Skath was silent. In his entire life, no opponent had ever refused to surrender when defeat was certain. No opponent had ever been willing to die just to take him down too. "You are strange creatures," Skath said. "I do not understand you." "No," Jack agreed. "You do not. But maybe you will." Skath turned to leave. Then he paused at the door. "One trial remains," he said. "The 7th trial. No one knows what it contains. Champions who faced it never returned to tell others." "I know." "You will still compete?" Jack smiled. "I will still compete." Skath studied him for a long moment. Then he made a gesture that Jack's translator identified as respect. "Then I will see you there, human, and we will discover together what the ancients were truly looking for." He left without another word. Jack lay in the medical bed, looking up at the ceiling. His body was broken. His mind was exhausted. The final trial awaited him, and he had no idea what it would bring. But he was still alive, and that meant he still had a chance. Across the galaxy, 300 billion humans waited for news. They watched the broadcasts showing their champion being carried from the arena. They saw his broken body and his blood-covered face, and they saw him smiling. They did not understand yet what that smile meant, but they were beginning to hope that maybe, just maybe, the impossible was possible. The final trial awaited. The final trial took place on a world called Origin. According to ancient records, it was the birthplace of the first species to travel between stars. They had left physical form behind millions of years ago, but they had left something behind. Echoes of themselves, stored in machines that still functioned after all this time. Jack Morrison stood in an amphitheater made of pure light. The walls shifted and changed, showing images of galaxies being born and dying. Time itself seemed different here, moving in ways that human minds could not fully understand. Only 3 champions had survived to reach the 7th trial. Jack, Skath, and a being of living metal called Vorn. They stood together in the light, waiting for whatever came next. The echo appeared without warning. It took a form that each champion could understand. To Sketh, it appeared as an ancient Vreliki sage. To Vorn, it appeared as a perfect geometric shape. To Jack, it appeared as a human figure made entirely of stars. "You have come far," the echo said. Its voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. "Few reach this place. Fewer still understand why they are here." Sketh stepped forward. "We are here to prove our worth, to show that our species deserves a place among the stars." The echo turned to face him. "And how would you prove this worth?" Sketh's mandibles clicked with confidence. "The Vreliki have conquered 100 worlds. We have built an empire that spans this entire arm of the galaxy. We are strong. We are numerous. We are survivors." "You speak of power," the echo said. "Power is not worth." Vorn spoke next. "My species has existed for 2 million years. We have calculated the movements of every star in our region. We have built structures that will last until the universe itself dies. We are eternal." "You speak of duration," the echo said. "Duration is not worth." The echo turned to Jack. The human was still healing from the 6th trial. His arm was wrapped in bandages. His ribs ached with every breath. He looked small and fragile compared to the others. "And you, human? Why should your species be permitted to inherit the stars?" Jack had thought about this question during every moment of his recovery. He had known it was coming. He had prepared a dozen different answers, each one designed to impress and persuade. But standing here, in this place built by beings who had seen everything the universe had to offer, he could not bring himself to use any of them. Instead, he told the truth. "I do not know if humanity deserves the stars," Jack said. The echo tilted its head. Sketh made a sound of surprise. This was not how the game was played. Jack continued. "We have done terrible things. We have killed each other for reasons that made no sense. We have destroyed parts of our own world out of greed and stupidity. We have been cruel to those who were different from us. We have made the same mistakes over and over again." "You admit your failures?" the echo said. "Why?" "Because they are true, and because lying to you would not change them." Jack took a deep breath. His ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain. "But we have also done other things. We have run into burning buildings to save strangers. We have crossed oceans in tiny boats because we wanted to know what was on the other side. We have looked up at the stars and wondered if someone was looking back." He thought about his sister Grace, digging through the ruins of dead civilizations, trying to understand beings she could never meet. He thought about Kevin and Lisa, working day and night to prepare him for trials that no human had ever faced. He thought about his parents, who had taught him that giving up was never an option. We have doctors who work until they collapse, trying to save patients they will never see again. We have artists who create beauty that will outlast their short lives. We have scientists who spend their entire existence trying to answer questions they know they will never solve. Jack looked directly at the echo, this fragment of beings who had transcended everything he could imagine. "Humanity does not deserve the stars," he said. "We have not earned them through conquest or survival or ancient wisdom. We are young and foolish, and we make mistakes constantly. Then why should you be permitted to reach for them?" Jack smiled. It was the same smile he had worn in the council chamber, the same smile that had confused every alien who had seen it. "Because we will reach for them anyway. We will fail and fall and get back up. We will meet new species and try to understand them. Not because we are wise, but because we are curious." He paused. "On my world, we have a saying. Humans are afraid of the dark. So we learn to make fire. That fire has never gone out. It burns in every human who has ever looked at something impossible and said, maybe I can do that anyway." The echo was silent for a long time. Jack could feel it studying him, seeing things that no sensor could detect. It was looking at something deeper than his body or his mind. It was looking at whatever made him human. The fire that refuses to die, the echo said finally. That is what the ancients were searching for. Not strength, not intelligence, not longevity. The quality that makes a species continue when all logic says they should stop. It turned to face all three champions. Sketh of the Verliki, your species is strong, but you surrender when the odds turn against you. You do not possess the fire. Sketh's mandibles clicked in protest, but he did not speak. Vorn of the living metal, your species endures, but you do not grow. You have not changed in 2 million years. You are frozen in time. You do not possess the fire. Vorn's metal body shifted, but remained silent. Jack Morrison of humanity, your species is young and flawed and makes mistakes constantly. But you keep trying. You keep reaching. You possess what the ancients sought. The amphitheater of light began to change. New images appeared on the walls. A key, glowing with energy, that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Humanity is granted the second key. This designation will take your species time to understand. But know this, you have been recognized. You have been found worthy. Jack did not know what the second key meant. He did not know what doors it would open, or what responsibilities it would bring. But he understood that something important had just happened. The trials were over. Humanity had won. When Jack returned to the council chamber, he was greeted by silence. 300 species watched as this small, wounded human walked to the center of the floor. The Vreliki ambassador sat frozen in his seat. The other delegates stared in disbelief. High Arbiter Voralax rose from his throne. The trials of Beatel have concluded. Humanity has passed all 7 challenges. The Vreliki challenge is rejected. Humanity retains all rights and territories. Ambassador Kravitz stood slowly. His mandibles were still. His body language showed defeat. We withdraw our challenge, he said. Humanity has proven their worth. The chamber erupted. Delegates from dozens of species began talking at once. Some were celebrating. Others were simply confused. A young species, barely 200 years in space, had just accomplished something that ancient empires had failed to achieve. Jack ignored the noise. He walked toward the Vreliki delegation, stopping directly in front of Sketh. The massive warrior looked down at him. They had fought each other nearly to death. They had faced the impossible together, and now they stood on the other side. You won, Sketh said. We both survived, Jack replied. That counts for something. Sketh was silent for a moment. I still do not understand your species. You are weak and short-lived and foolish, but you do not stop. You never stop. No, Jack agreed. We do not. He extended his hand. It was a human gesture, one that meant nothing to the Vreliki. But Sketh had learned something during the trials. He had learned that humans did things that made no sense, and somehow those things worked. He reached out with one of his clawed hands and clasped Jack's. What does this mean? Sketh asked. It means we can begin again. Whatever happened before is in the past. We start fresh. Sketh considered this, a strange custom, but perhaps a useful one. Jack smiled. Humanity has a lot of strange customs. Maybe someday we can share them with you. Across the galaxy, the news spread at the speed of light. Humanity had won Beatel. The young species that everyone had dismissed had proven themselves against trials that had destroyed countless champions before. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. On the colonies, families held each other and cried. In the halls of power, leaders began to understand that everything had changed. But the most important moment happened quietly. In a private room on Haven Station, when Jack Morrison finally reunited with his sister. Grace held him for a long time, without speaking. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," Jack corrected her. "All of us. Everyone who helped prepare me. Everyone who believed when the odds were impossible. Everyone who ever taught me that giving up was not an option." Grace smiled through her tears. "The fire that refuses to die." "The fire that refuses to die," Jack agreed. Outside the station, the stars stretched to infinity. Somewhere out there, ancient beings watched humanity take its first steps into a larger universe. Somewhere out there, new challenges awaited, new opportunities to fail and fall and get back up again. But for now, Jack Morrison stood at a window and watched the stars. He was tired and wounded and still healing. But he was also proud. Not proud of himself, but proud of his species. Proud of every human who had ever faced impossible odds and kept going anyway. The age of isolation was ending. Humanity was finally taking its place among the stars. And as always, they took another step forward. The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between 3 star systems, and its dome could hold a small moon inside. More than 300 species sent their representatives here to discuss a future of the galaxy. Today, every seat was filled. Commander Jack Morrison stood near the back of the human section. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's Unified Defense Coalition. His face showed nothing as he watched the alien delegates take their places. Beside him, Dr. Amy Lynn checked her tablet for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Her hands were shaking. "They called an emergency session," Amy whispered. "This has not happened in 200 years. Jack nodded, but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence often told you more than words. So he watched and waited. The chamber fell quiet when High Arbiter Vorlax rose from his seat. Vorlax belonged to the Kethrani, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His body was tall and thin, covered in silver scales that caught the light. His eyes were completely black, and when he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Representatives of the galactic community," Vorlax began, "we have received a formal challenge under the ancient laws of Beatel." A wave of noise swept through the chamber. Jack heard gasps, angry shouts, and the clicking sounds that some species made when they were afraid. Amy grabbed his arm. "Beatel," she breathed. "Jack, do you know what that means?" "I know," he said quietly. Beatel was old. It was older than most of the species in this chamber. The ancient ones who had first traveled between stars had created it as a way to settle disputes without war. When one species challenged another, the challenged species had to send a single champion to face 7 trials on 7 different worlds. If the champion failed, their species lost everything. Territory, rights, voice in the council, everything. The survival rate for Beatel champions was less than 3%. Vorlax raised one long arm, and the chamber fell silent again. The Vreliki Empire has formally challenged the human coalition. They claim that humanity is too young, too weak, and too primitive to hold territory in the Orion sector. Jack looked across the chamber to where the Vreliki delegation sat. They were insectoid creatures, each one standing nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in hard black armor, and their faces had no expression that humans could read. But Jack could see the way they held themselves. They were confident. They thought they had already won. The Vreliki ambassador rose from his seat. His name was Kravith, and he had been working against humanity for 50 years. His mandibles clicked as he spoke. "The humans are children," Kravith said. "They have been in space for only 200 of their short years. They live barely a single century before they die. They breathe only a narrow range of air. They break easily. They are not worthy of standing among the elder races. Murmurs of agreement came from several sections of the chamber. Jack noticed which species nodded along with Kravet's words. He filed that information away for later. Under the laws of Beatel, Kravet continued, we demand that humanity prove their worth or surrender their claims to the Orion sector and accept permanent observer status. Amy's face had gone pale. Jack, if we lose this, we lose everything. The Orion colonies, our seat on the council, our right to expand. 3 billion people live in that sector. I know, Jack said again. Vorlax turned his black eyes toward the human section. Does the human coalition accept this challenge? There was a long moment of silence. The human ambassador, a tired old man named George Palmer, stood slowly. His voice shook when he spoke. We accept the challenge, Palmer said. We have no choice under galactic law. But we request time to select our champion. That is your right, Vorlax said. You have 30 standard days to name your representative. Jack had heard enough. He stepped forward, moving past the other humans in his section. People turned to stare at him. Amy called his name, but he did not stop. I volunteer, Jack said. His voice was calm and clear. It carried across the vast chamber. I will be humanity's champion. The silence that followed was complete. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at this human, this small creature in his gray uniform who had just volunteered for almost certain death. Kravet made a sound that might have been laughter. This is your champion? This fragile thing? Jack looked at the Vreliki ambassador. He simply smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a brave smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not. It confused every alien in the chamber. They had expected fear. They had expected desperation. They had not expected this quiet confidence. Then Jack took a single step forward. Just one step. But in that step was everything that made humanity different. It was the step of ancestors who had left safe caves to explore unknown lands. It was the step of sailors who had crossed black oceans without knowing what lay beyond. It was the step of astronauts who had climbed into tiny metal boxes and let fire carry them into the empty sky. Vorlax studied Jack for a long moment. You understand what you have volunteered for, human? I do. You understand that 7 trials await you, each one designed to break the body and mind of any living creature? I understand. And yet you smile? Where I come from, we have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog. None of the aliens understood the reference, but they understood the tone. This human was not afraid. This human was not pretending to be brave. This human genuinely believed he could win. Kravet's mandibles clicked with irritation. We accept this volunteer. Let it be recorded that humanity has chosen their champion. The trials will begin in 40 standard days. The session ended, but the chamber did not empty quickly. Delegates from dozens of species lingered, watching Jack Morrison as he walked back to the human section. They whispered to each other, in languages that the translation systems could barely handle. Amy grabbed Jack's arm as soon as he reached her. What are you doing? Do you have any idea what you just signed up for? Yes. The survival rate is 3%, Jack. 3%. Jack looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she had not noticed before. It was not madness. It was not foolish hope. It was something deeper and older. Humanity has faced worse odds, he said quietly. We are still here. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the representatives of 300 species watched him go. Most of them thought he was walking toward his death. They did not understand yet.